Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, and it is 5:45 a.m., and this is Walk the Dog with Riot Mortdog. Hopefully everybody's having a good day. It's the start of a work week. So, yeah. Today's patch day for me in the sense that today is lock the patch, and I don't have a lot of time for it today, so it's got to be quick. But thankfully, the good news is I woke up this morning to look at TFT Academy, and there are 0 S tier comps. Feels good. Feels good. Not to say the meta is perfect. I still think one cost reroll in particular is a little weak overall. Some of the four, like you're telling me Zeri could use like a 2% buff. Or 7 exotech, like 7 exotech's basically unplayable. Stuff like that, but pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. I didn't get to watch a lot of the tacticians trials, but from what I saw, there was a wide variety of things played and things did well, and I don't hear a lot of yapping. So we take those. We take those. That's a victory in my book. Which is good because I need to be switching off of live mostly anyway and focusing on 15 and getting that out the door and making sure that's really good. So good stuff. Good stuff. That's a good start to a week, I think. And like I said, I want this week to be a good week. It's not that busy a week, but it's also, I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's my birthday week. I don't know. I want it to be a good week. So anyway. Time to answer some questions. Today's questions aren't exactly the easiest, so I'll do my best here to answer them, but today's questions are actually kind of hard, so let's see here. All right, first one is, what is your favorite mistake in TFT we wanted to keep but couldn't? This is always a weird question for me because now that I'm like this, high up senior director or whatever, the idea that there's something I wanted to keep but couldn't doesn't really exist. If something's really, really good, if we look at this and we're like, no, this needs to happen, we'll make it happen. Or at least I can be like, no, guys, we need to make this happen. This thing is so good. Right? I mean, literally RNG Golem was Roger's idea, and I was like, that's good. Let's just make this happen. And Kent did all the extra work, so props to Kent. But like, we just do it, That's one of the things I love about working on the TFT team is when someone has a good idea that is good for the game and we recognize it, we just do it. We don't let bureaucratic tape really stop us too much, which is great. A lot of some of our people just like put in the extra effort. People like Giovanni who'll just be like, hey, you want that in? I'll just do that. That'll be my Thursday, So there aren't really a lot of great examples of things we've wanted. Now, you talk about mistakes, though, as far as favorite mistakes. There are definitely risks we've taken that are like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that. Some of them you've experienced. I think a lot of them are like, I forget the name of that augment, but the augment that said all your units now buy and sell for 0 gold. That was an example where it was like, man, we went like, it started as prismatic. We thought it was terrible. We moved it all the way down to silver. And then it came out, and the way it was played was really exploitative. It just, like, stuff like that where it's like, well, we tried, we tried to make it work. I'm trying to think of any other, 5-cost stuff that we've done where it's like, nah, but, that's the thing. We're also remember how I said I'm kind of bad at forgetting the past? We're kind of good to the point now where it's like, if someone has an idea, we can tell pretty quick if it's going to work or not. At this point, we're pretty familiar with what TFT is. So I don't have a lot of great mistakes. The funny thing is, people like Giovanni and Whitrock would actually be better at answering this question, I bet. Whitrock especially. He's like our historian, if you will. He'll probably remember something where it was like really silly, but that's why I said today's a hard question, but we definitely have made a lot of mistakes. I think if you had to talk about from like a balance perspective, the biggest mistake we've made that I know players want back is stuff like Artifactory the stuff that like turns all your items into artifacts, right? Because like, who has more fun than someone like a Leduc of the world if every single one of your items is an artifact, right? Because like, artifacts are fun, and it turns out having 10 artifacts is pretty fun. And our initial instinct of like, we really want to keep this. Yeah, it makes sense, because if we index on fun, having 10 artifacts, very fun. But some of the combinations get a little out of control. I think that's the thing about making these like unique items like that, is that they're going to have those pretty insane things. So we made it sort of an internal rule that like players shouldn't be getting like more than 3 artifacts per game. But that's one of those rules that like, do we gotta? And like anyone on the team who indexes on fun was sort of like, but why? It's so fun. But like, man, the ceiling cases, because it's one of those things where you'd have to nerf all the artifacts to deal with those ceiling cases. And I'd rather the artifacts get to be sharp and interesting rather than have to deal with those, incredibly niche cases and balance around them. So I think that's another one where it's like player facing, that like the mistake we made was letting players have 10 artifacts, but I think we want to keep it. Ooh, car coming this way. That's very early. They're going very fast. Goodbye, car. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other mistakes. I mean, there's bugs, but that we joke about keeping. I always tell the Riven story where Riven killed the player and we're like, lol, lol, lol. And then we joke about like, oh, let's make stuff that like your little legend has to dodge. But like, come on, we're not actually doing stuff like that. So yeah, I know this is kind of an unsatisfying answer to the question, but I'm really trying to think of like if there's any really great like mistakes. But like I said, we've gotten so good to the point now where it's like we don't usually make those kind of like big mistakes. We usually kill those at the paper phase. So it would have to be something all the way back in like set 1 through 6 that I just don't remember. And I'm bad at that stuff, so anyway, I think that's all I can give you on that question. Again, apologies if that's not super satisfying, but all right. Next one, this is another hard one. How did we decide how much info is hidden versus not? And as a side question, why is it every time when I inspect somebody, it shows the level 1 power of their ability when I inspect an enemy unit? So this is one of those like, you kind of backed into it sort of answers. So this is actually we call UX, user experience, right? And the question is like, take all the possible information in the game. How much of it needs to be on the screen at any given moment, right? This isn't World of Warcraft. We don't need a giant raid window filled with all possible information. That's just an overwhelming bad experience, right? Common example of this that always gets brought up is like, put the number of units left in the shop on each unit when it appears in the shop. So on the shop card, it would say like, there are 19 Shakos left in the pool. That's a lot. That's a lot of numbers on your screen. That's a bit much. Some of this is like stuff that even before my time, because remember, I wasn't on the project for the first 4 months, but like, the gold thingies, the gold farms, whatever they're called, that show that have 10 interest. That's something that like, had we been there from the beginning, would that be the right thing to play? And we've toyed with removing those before. Sorry, there's the uphill part. We've toyed with removing those gold mines. That's what they're called, gold mines. But the problem is we'd made so many maps that the cost of going back and changing every single map to no longer have gold mines, not really worth it. So we've stuck with gold mines because they were there. Now, if you told me instead of gold mines, there was supposed to be a little score indicator that showed how much gold you had, yeah, maybe. Or the fact that The gold mines have inherently made it so that we must have, interest in increments of 10 up to 5. Yeah, these are things that remember how I've talked about how we don't want the game to change too much between set over set? That's another foundational thing is econ. People who know how to econ, they know how to econ set over set. So we haven't really changed that. So again, all of this comes down to we created a starting point that had things like gold mines that showed interest, shop cards that showed shop, health, stuff like that. But that's not to say we're perfect. An example of this, of where we've added to the UX, is future matchups, right? For those who didn't play way back in the day, it used to be we didn't show player matchups who could be fighting, and people found a way to track it using a notepad file in the mini-map, which was really cumbersome. And it was rather than do that, let's just put that on the UI. There are other examples, something that's been on our backlog forever, we really just need to do it at some point, is for a while we didn't have the level up on the UX. The player level was not on the scoreboard, right? So right now where it shows you have 92 health, it doesn't show what level you are. The logic behind that one was that we had seen a pattern in games like Underlords and Auto Chess, where if one person leveled up, everyone would level up. It created this really bad thing where people who played those games all played in the exact same manner. And so putting that information to the front created the situation where it felt like strategies weren't being invested in. So we said, hey, we're not going to put that on the scoreboard. But fast forward 5 years, game's been out for a while, people already understand the strategies. And to top it off, there's this issue that we still haven't fixed, where if a player is near the top of your screen, you can't see their health bar, so you have no idea what level they are. So we need to fix this, right? At this point, it's time. Just put the levels on the damn scoreboard. Now, it will open up more, there's more numbers on the scoreboard, but I think it'll be useful. At a glance to see whoa, that player's level 9 and everyone else is level 7. That'll create some cool stories. So that's something that needs to be done at some point. Another common one that gets brought up is loss streaking. Loss streaking is another example where very early on I got the question so many times of why are there not blue flames when someone is loss streaking? Same thing, makes the UX really, really busy. If you've got 2 orange flames, 2 blue flames, because having a nice, clear UI that isn't immediately overwhelming is a good thing. So, but like I said, we definitely don't have it perfect, and there are definitely things that we need to add at some point. So, but, your question was how did we make these decisions? A lot of it was we had a starting point, right? The team who initially made the game had the starting point, and then each new case that comes up, we think about the pros and cons of making the UX more complicated versus providing that information and how necessary it is. Now, one of the challenges here is that our most engaged players are the ones who are going to give the feedback most likely, right? Our most engaged players are the ones who are going to be I would love to see level on there and loss streak on there and bag sizes on there and any extra information you got. Give me more information. But a good UX isn't designed around your power users. A good UX is designed for your first time users, right? A new player sits down to play TFT, they shouldn't have a shitload of buttons. And this is mostly true for any piece of software, right? Adobe Photoshop is an extreme power user piece of software that has a very, very complex UI, whereas something like MS Paint is the opposite. And we have to find where we are on that line, but the more you make it about power users, the less, wide your audience is. And the thing I always say to our challenger players is you want those big prize pools for your tournaments? You want the wider audience playing the game. Those are directly correlated. See every other esport out there right now. So, yeah. A lot of it just comes down to that trade-off of what's good and what's not for that UI. But like I said, we're not perfect. So, yeah, there you go. Oh, and then the question was, why do I inspect somebody and it always shows their level 1 ability? Man, this is the, like, for our engineering team, this is like a League of Legends engine limitation that would require such a massive code rewrite to fix that there's no way we can justify the cost just to fix that issue. It's like, I would need an engineer here to explain it in great detail, but basically it comes down to tooltips in League were designed with the player state in mind, because in League of Legends there's only one player, which is you. And when inspecting someone else, it's not the player, and you can't have more than one player. Like I said, it's beyond my understanding as far as how the code works. But yeah, very, very large assumptions get made that would have to be completely rewritten. That being said, we know it's an issue, and there are steps being taken that will hopefully someday resolve this issue. But the fact we've been around for 6 years and that's still a thing. You're definitely right. Like, that's just so annoying. It's really annoying, especially like, oh, I see a 3-star 4 cost. You right click them. How much damage are they going to deal? It says 300. That's not a lot. Wait a minute. You know, like, it is definitely a painful, painful thing. But like I said, just something we just have to like, and stuff like this is always, you know, it's what happens when you make a game in a 15, 16-year-old engine now. So, yeah. Yeah, there are definitely, you know, life ain't perfect. Life ain't perfect. Ain't that the truth? So, all right, there you go. All right, next one. Any character fantasy that hasn't been explored yet? This is an interesting one because, you know, the person used like stacking as an example of a character fantasy we've done. You know, we have our auto attackers, we have our spellcasters that are AD. We've even did like Kog'Maw, who was like an AP auto attacker. We have our, obviously, like our multicast, our dot spells, our AoE spells. We've got, you know, things like Tom Kench and Utility and Garen. So the short answer is, at the highest level, do I think there are any character fantasies that haven't really been explored? I don't think so. I think we've, at the highest level, hit all the fantasies. Like, we have explored support, and we know the negatives it brings, but we've at least explored it. We know what a healer looks like. We know what different tanks look like. We know what a drain tank looks like. We've done Vlad many times. We know what all these AD and AP champions look like. We know what they all look like. But the devil's in the details. So while I don't think there are any character fantasies we haven't really explored, I do think the execution of those character fantasies can vary. And I think there are still outputs that we haven't explored. A dumb example, and I'm literally making this up. This is not in an upcoming set. I am literally making this up. But imagine we had a, again, this is just how my brain works. I'm literally making this up off the fly. This is not a real thing. But imagine we had a 4-cost Annie, and you know, Tibbers is on the field, and so is Annie, and we use like a Blood Moon skin, and it's a drain tank, and the way it works is Annie has built-in Gunblade, so you need your Annie to do lots of damage, and the Tibbers actually doesn't have a spell. It's just a big ball of meat, but the spell is the Annie who's casting the spell to give that shield and that survivability and that tankiness to the Tibbers, right? So it's like a channeled drain tank, right? Still a drain tank. It's not like a new character fantasy, but it's a different execution of Annie, and it's drain tanking meets like Puppeteer. which we've never done before. Could be cool. Maybe I'll write that down and put that in set 20. Aha. Just kidding. There's reasons not to do that. But like I said, that's an example of like an execution on a character fantasy that we haven't done, Another common one I always talk about, like, oh, we'll never do this, is the like Silas spell steal thing, where he steals the abilities of other champions, because that's his whole alt in League of Legends. That's his like main identifying factor. But we've never done that in TFT. So what does a version of that look like? Right? There are versions of spells that we've not done. Now, some champions, they don't really have a whole lot to explore. I always go back to like Caitlyn. It's like, Caitlyn has a gun. She shoots the gun. That's kind of what she does. And a Caitlyn that lays a trap down, badge. A Caitlyn that shoots her net, also pretty badge. So again, she has shoot and shoot. Woo! Not really going to get a lot of like off the base Caitlyn, but who knows? You look at set 13 Caitlyn, and I think the team did a great job of extrapolating like, okay, well, she's still going to shoot, but she's also going to summon a freaking airship. Cool. And it fit the theme of the show. It was unique for the output. And I think we have a lot of room to do stuff like that, where it's like, League would never go anywhere near something like that. They're not going to have League of Legends Caitlyn summoning an airship on Summoner's Rift. But we can do cool stuff like that. And I think that's a lot of what we still have a ton of room. There are champions that have only been in TFT sets like once or twice. And even when they are, they're kind of looking at you, Evelyn or Xin Zhao. I think we've done Karthus twice, and both times it's its ult. But like, and again, making this up, not a real thing. But imagine there's a Shadow Karthus, and his ability is like, his little like Q dot thing, but instead it's like fists from the underground, and if it kills them, it pulls them underground and leaves behind a treasure chest. I don't know. We can do stuff like that. So, yeah. So back to your original question: is there any high-level fantasy we haven't explored? No. But is there any character fantasies we haven't explored? I think a lot. I think there's a lot of creative stuff we can still do. And in fact, I look at, the things I do know with set 15 and 16 and 17. There's some good stuff. And that's not even to talk about like hero augments, right? Like Giovanni for set 15 just added a hero augment. And it was like, really? But also cool? It's like, yeah, we can just do that because we're TFT and it's fun. And there's a very, like, wouldn't have been the first thing I thought of, but it's great. And that's a cool thing, So, yeah. I think that kind of covers it, but lots of cool stuff to do, lots of stuff coming, lots of stuff that I could just make up off the top of my head that isn't coming, but could. I think we got a lot of room. So, yeah. All right. Last question for the day. What are your thoughts on the class emblems now giving more than just the trait? Has that been a success? And do we think Origins could also get that effect? So, hang on. Oh, it's still recording. Okay, good. And it's starting to rain. Okay. So the answer to this one is, I think it's generally been a success, but there was a trade-off. Oh, it's raining hard. Okay. There's been a trade-off, right? Like, I think getting a class emblem now is more exciting, and we're starting to tune them up. You saw last patch, we actually tuned up a bunch of them, and they're finally getting to the point where they're actually pretty exciting, which was the goal. And shout outs to Sam. Sam was the original one who suggested this, and it was a good idea, which is why we did it. Again, going back to recognizing good ideas. Sam had a very good idea. And I think we're finally getting to where it's exciting, right? Like Marksman Emblem, when it was shredding 1 armor, who cares? Marksman Emblem now that's shredding 3 armor? Oh, Nelly! Was it like people like True Bis MF is now marksman emblem? Good. That's cool. Emblems are neat, you know? And if anything, I think ones like Bastion emblem, we still have room to go. Like, I think we went a little too conservative at our launch. Probably should have cranked them up a little bit, especially now that emblems have become pretty rare, other than a few encounter exceptions. But I think having emblems be exciting is a good thing. The trade-off here, though, is complexity, right? Like, it used to be emblems were simple. Emblem give trait. Emblem make you be trait. Great. Now it's, well, you have to remember that, like, because Slayer emblem is about healing, the actual best user is blank, Renekton, because he's the one who benefits from healing. And if you give him a BT, he heals too, you know, like, you have to remember all these extra steps, which is a lot more to think about. So, but I think where we are in our game's life and the audience that we're trying to serve right now, I think that trade-off has been worth it, especially for class emblems. And especially because class emblems, because classes have become this thing we don't really innovate on anymore. Classes are just like, you know, bruiser is health and tanks are armor and MR. Having an extra layer of excitement is good. And I think, if anything, that's the space where we can innovate now. Where we can be like, oh, bruiser just does health, but the emblem does this really cool thing, and almost treat it like an artifact, which is really, really cool. So do I think Origins could get that? Maybe. I think the answer, if I had to, like, gun to my head right now, I'd say yes. I think they could. I think it's a lot of extra work to make sure that we think of the outputs, and it's a lot more complicated, right? Like, marksman gives AD, and the emblem shreds armor. Cool. But Anima Squad emblem activates Anima Squad, and the emblem has them fire the weapon more. It's like weirdly hard to enhance the very, like, it's such a vague thing, the Anima Squad, of like fire the weapon. How does the emblem tap into that extra? Would have to be something we think about. And what you don't want is the emblem to become necessary to the ceiling of the comp, right? If Anima Squad isn't playable unless you have an emblem, because the emblem makes Anima Squad weapons fire 0.5 seconds faster, that's a bad thing. Or using Golden Ox as an example, where it's like, the Golden Ox emblem has double the chance to drop gold or items. Okay, well then again, the ceiling is now based around the emblem, and all we've done is make the comp only playable with the emblem. That's what we need to avoid. So there's this balancing act of making sure that the emblem is interesting, but not necessary to the ceiling of the composition, else the world where they become only playable from the emblem. And that's the trade-off, right? And I think, like, marksman has been good here, because you can play 4 marksman without the marksman emblem, but the output would have to match that. So I can't say I've thought about, like, exactly what those outputs would be, but the idea that Anima Squad emblem isn't just something you throw on a trait bot is a good thing for the game, and I would pursue that. I'd pursue that. That'd be kind of cool. So I think the other thing, though, is that this is, again, one of the things we talk about with, like, making sets is the more stuff we keep adding to the game, the harder sets are to make. Because now what we've done is, hey, set 15, all your emblems need to have an effect on them. So if you've got any new classes, better make sure they have an effect. And you know players aren't going to be happy if they all just have the same effects as the last class emblem batch. Then they get boring. So you've got to come up with new effects for your new class emblems, and which is an extra layer of work. And I'm not saying it's a lot of work, but all of that does add up, right? So now it's like, when you're making your set, don't forget your hero augments, your circlets, your emblem items, you know. Oh, and don't forget your chase traits and your whatevers, you know, like, and if you want to add new unique artifacts, you got to make sure you do that. Like, the volume of content in our sets continues to grow, and this is always Peter's worry. And as that grows, every set becomes more and more expensive to make. And when I say expensive, I mean time. I don't mean money. Because, you know, we also have a team that we need to not have burnout. They need to, keep making sets, keep being healthy, and not at the end of every set go, I never want to do this again because it was so intense. So it all adds up. But again, rounding back all the way to your original question, do I think it's been a success? Yeah. I'm glad Sam had the idea. Props, Sam. Would I do it again? Yeah. Would I do it to Origins with the right output? Yes. But the challenge would be coming up with that right output. So there you go. All right. We are at 30 minutes. I'm getting to the uphill part. My walks are very predictable in their timing. It takes me about 10 more minutes from this point to get home. But this way at the end, you don't have to hear me like out of breath. 30 minutes also feels like the right time for one of these videos. It gives me time to like put this in my pocket. I'm now soaking wet. Insert joke here. But yeah, hopefully this week brings some surprises. Like I said, locking in 14.5. The nice thing is I expect the patch, other than the item changes, to be pretty small. I already had a draft in, and now I need to go back and change it, but it'll be light. So yeah, should be good. Cool. Well, have a good week. I'll keep posting these every day, at least on weekdays. We'll see about weekends. Yeah, looking forward to stuff. And try to think, is there anything else crazy going on? No, I think that's mostly it. So cool. Have a good Monday. I'm going to go dry off, take a shower, take my kids to school, and make a patch. All right. Have a good day. Take it easy. Until next time. I said that backwards. Take it easy.